Well, we're back with a bit of a familiar face today. I am joined by Jonathan Rackoff. He is the head of global policy over at the HBAR Foundation. Jonathan, welcome. We really appreciate you hopping on here with us.
Thanks, Brendan. It's great to be here.
Well, we got a lot of cool things in store today, but for the people who aren't as familiar with you, let me give you a bit of an introduction. You have over 20 years of experience working in sustainability as an ESG leader, and you also got to work in the White House for 7 years. Is that right?
7 years in the Obama administration, partly in the White House and partly at EPA, yes.
Well, tell us a little bit about that, because that goes a long way. Not only do you have that 20 years of experience working in sustainability, but you also worked at the White House or with the White House. And that's something that very few other people can say that they've done. So, just, briefly tell us about that.
Yeah, it was a fantastic experience. So I'm trained as a lawyer and, expected that I'd be writing briefs and appearing before judges. And that was going to be a, sort of great career. But I had the opportunity when President Obama was elected to join the White House Office of Management and Budget and help lead their regulatory portfolio with Cass Sunstein and others. That was a fantastic experience. It was right around when the financial crisis had happened, and we had financial services reform, as well as a lot of climate action that was starting to sort of rise to the top of the policy agenda. And after a few years, I had a chance to go to EPA and work on the climate agenda. And so those kind of twin focus points, the financial services reform and the environmental side, didn't seem apparent at the time, but shaped what the work I would later do. So now I find myself working in the blockchain space, focused on sustainability at the HBAR Foundation, where I helped to lead a $100 million sustainable impact fund, among other things.
So what leads you, like a man with your experience, what leads you to getting into crypto and into the world of blockchain and everything that comes with that?
I mean, to be honest, I'm a few years older than a lot of my kind of crypto colleagues, and they're far more expert at it than me. Two things. I come from a sort of traditional legal background where you work in a regulatory agency and hope to achieve sort of policy outcomes top down. But a lot of the things that we did in the Obama administration were reversed in the next presidential administration, and it can be disheartening. And when I went to private practice after, I started working with technology companies, looking at their sustainability objectives and their climate action journeys and ESG work, and found there to be really exciting ways to make an impact outside of government. And it just so happens one of those clients was Coinbase, introduced me to the crypto space, met all the really exciting smaller teams building climate solutions using Web3 tools that I didn't know really existed. I thought of crypto, like most people did, as maybe in the best case scenario a substitute for or supplement to the traditional financial system. Worst case, it was meme coins only that were going to sort of be pumped up and maybe fizzle. I didn't think of it as an opportunity for solving real world problems for enterprises. And when I was introduced to the HBAR Foundation and Hedera, among other networks, layer ones, I was just really excited by the opportunity that the technology presented to solve some of the problems that in government you would have had to go through multi-year regulatory processes to even chip away at.
And Hedera is a little bit different from your average blockchain. So I'd love to kind of hear you kind of just talk about that, because when it comes to Hedera, people go, oh, maybe it is an Ethereum competitor, which, I think it is. But just because it's a competitor to Ethereum doesn't mean that the two are all that similar.
Right. So we are a proof of stake network, and that of course gives us a energy consumption advantage. My far more sophisticated colleagues from a technology perspective will like me to say that we aren't actually a blockchain. We're something similar. Hedera Hashgraph has a slightly different kind of consensus algorithm, but what really matters is that it was designed to be low energy. So the kinds of complaints that every other article in the New York Times had about crypto in like the summer of 21, about how crypto was had the energy consumption of a small Nordic nation, something like that. Those problems really aren't as acute for networks that are designed with sustainability in mind. So we've done a number of independent studies to sort of get a sense of what our true energy consumption is, and I believe fairly well validated that a transaction on the Hedera network is at parity with or less energetically intensive than a credit card transaction, Visa, MasterCard. So once you get to that place, the hope is to focus a little bit less on why these technologies are bad and need to be controlled or suppressed. Not to say that there aren't. The Bitcoin network is well, it may have lots of value. Is yes, very energetically intensive. Our network is not, and we're very proud of that. When I started with Hedera, we were probably the if not the only one of very few that can make that claim. In fairness, a lot of networks now are working very hard to keep their sustainability really high, and so now it's about a matter of sort of what problems we can solve, right? How do we work with enterprises and governments, NGOs, individuals, so that we're using this really exciting technology to move the sustainability and climate stories forward.
So you have this deep, well built out background of sustainable practices. What kind of complaints do you often see directed towards crypto? And do you think that those criticisms are legitimate?
Sure. Well, as happens in most industries, the worst complaints often come from just a lack of information, right? And so, like I said before, there's still, I think, a very sizable contingent of people in the environmental community who view me as having sort of moved over to the dark side because if I care about climate and invested a lot of my time and energy in sort of good regulatory policy to achieve social outcomes, why would I go to a technology space that everyone knows is harmful to the climate? And so what I find in my role, it's important to do in the beginning is just to deconstruct those misconceptions and help people understand that what really matters is what the value of the social value of the technology can be. What problems can you solve? If you drive your electric car, your brand new Tesla or your Kia or Hyundai or whatever it might be, you might not be emitting carbon, but there's a huge impact from the construction of that vehicle, from the mining of the lithium. So there's no free lunch. There's always a cost, and so what I find it's most important to do is sort of get beyond the sticker shock of that cost and get to the kinds of solutions we need to build. In addition to that, the entire industry has just suffered from association with FTX and other big blow-ups or instances of fraud, and that's just something we're going to have to deal with probably for some time to come. But the truth is, we don't want to paint the whole industry with that brush. We want to sort of focus on the positive story. We're solving real world environmental problems, real world financial inclusion problems with our technology, just like other projects are as well. And we need to regulate or give regulatory clarity to the industry so that investment can go up, and if the fear level can go down, and you achieve stability.
Yeah, and you spend a lot of time talking to the leaders in this space. Like even right now, you're over at New York Climate Week, so maybe you can give us an update on that. But you spend a lot of time talking with leaders all over the world, whether it is what you're doing right now in New York, whether it's even speaking with the World Economic Forum, other governing bodies. What is the general consensus here about crypto tech?
Well, so it varies by jurisdiction, right? If in different governments, different policymakers in different regions have different priorities and different concerns. The EU, for example, is quite a bit more concerned about ESG. I would say, hopefully my U.S.-based ESG colleagues won't, be mad at me for that statement. But we've been waiting for the SEC to come out with some climate reporting regulatory action for some time. I certainly believe that they will do that. But even when they do, there will be a rather significant period of time where legal challenges can be brought. And in the European context, you see sort of regulation after regulation being proposed, and sometimes what's implemented is slightly different than the proposal, but the point is, progress is being made. And so, what I find it's most important to do is get a sense of what the priorities are on the team, the policymaking team that you're speaking with, and speak to those priorities, right? Adapt. The industry has to adapt itself to the needs and concerns of the government regulators that we're speaking with, rather than sort of being afraid of them or treating them as the enemy or with any other kind of hostility. It's also important because many of those government bodies or non-governmental organizations, I suppose you would put the UN in that category, treaty organizations, they're putting out big white papers, major reports. You mentioned the WEF, the World Economic Forum, and they have put out some writing on the role of blockchain and sustainability. And it's important to be there and ensure that industry has a voice, not to substitute our voice for theirs, but rather just to be sure that the commentary that will be read very widely is well informed, right? Because that's the base for the public's understanding of what our industry does.
Yeah, and we were chatting about real world use cases when it comes to this stuff. What are some of the most prominent ones that you see?
So there are a lot. I can tell you that, yes, I am in New York right now, New York City, with the UN General Assembly and New York Climate Week, which is a week-long opportunity for policymakers to begin the negotiation on topics leading up to COP28, which will be in Dubai this year, to negotiate the implementation of the Paris Agreement. But it also is an opportunity for all of these, sort of fantastic, sustainability-focused Web3 startups and teams that I mentioned at the beginning of our chat to come together and share information about what they're doing. The industry is focused, I can tell you, from just, maybe not even 48 hours of boots on the ground here. The industry is doing amazing things. My team has spent quite a bit of time focusing on how to make the voluntary carbon market, and as well as some key compliance carbon markets, emissions trading schemes in different parts of the world, more credible, more efficient. And we can do that in a couple of different ways. We have some Hedera based technology. One application in particular called the Guardian, which it does a lot of really exciting things, but bottom line, it helps us make a better carbon credit, right? It enables us to build in all of the identity that is lacking, all of the rich metadata associated with a carbon credit. So a carbon credit, just for your listeners' background, historically, it's just a piece of paper that represents that there was some environmental benefit in some other part of the world. So a stand of trees were planted, and we use a methodology that says that if you plant this many trees of this type and this kind of location, a certain number of years go by, and you will have sucked, a certain number of metric tons of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, which is a good thing. And we want to give people an opportunity to monetize that, because otherwise they arguably wouldn't plant the trees, right? There are other kinds of credits too that are a little harder to enforce, credits that someone might get for just deciding not to cut down trees that he might have the legal right to cut down. But what we're focused on is how to take what had been just that piece of paper, right? Something that might be a little bit more subject to human error, to fraud, to double counting, and make it higher credibility, higher integrity. So, if you can look at that piece of paper and transform it into a tokenized asset, digital environmental asset that exists on chain, can be traded on chain, and you can in the asset itself, you can see all of the entities that have owned it, the entire transaction history, all of the roles and actors in the environmental project that gave rise to it, right? You just have a lot more, the public has a much greater reason to trust that this synthetic asset is a real thing, and not just a lot of hot air that some investigative reporter at the Guardian, not our our software, but the publication will sort of uncover as having been illusory or fraudulent. What we believe we can do through technology is to help catalyze greater efficiency and activity and liquidity in these markets. And the idea is not to make money, but it's to bring finance to parts of the world, ideally in the global south, where a lot of these environmental projects are already located, but they don't have a lot of capital to stand up new projects. So we provide that capital through this, these young markets that we're helping mature. And there are co-benefits associated with that. So, for example, if you're planting a stand of trees, to take my former example, maybe you bring jobs to that part of the world. The traditional climate analysis wouldn't necessarily credit you with having done a good thing for having brought economic vitality to an economically depressed part of the world. But we care about that too. Sustainability means sustainable development as well as climate action.
Yeah, I think in the midst of everything that's happened over the course of the last year and a half, 2 years now, there are these articles that circle around that talk about how governments want to get rid of crypto. They want to regulate it harshly. And I don't think that it's necessarily that true. I think a lot of the times these articles are a little bit over exaggerated with a bit of FUD. And I think that there's a difference between governments wanting regulatory clarity and like outright banning it. And so you kind of mentioned that them wanting these kind of regulatory clarities isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, most of these countries, at least around the world, they really are not against crypto and blockchain tech. Like, they want it to be around. They just want it to be under the correct jurisdiction and under the correct regulations. And that seems to be what they're figuring out now.
Absolutely. I appreciate you bring up that point. I mean, having been in government, I can tell you that, the people writing the rules and regulations, at least in my experience in the US federal government, are, some of the most dedicated and, and smart and expert in their field that you'll ever find. I mean, these are not, the, sort of punch the card and go home early, sort of bureaucrats from, some cartoon. These are some of the most impressive people out there. But, like anything else, what you have been exposed to. And, if you've dedicated yourself to policymaking in Washington, D.C., you probably haven't. Some people may have, but you probably haven't been in a startup environment working in these, areas of emerging tech. And so, ideally, when a government agency promulgates a new rule, especially if it's restrictive or has a significant economic cost, they're going through the APA process, which involves, seeking public comment. And what part of my role is to provide those kinds of comments. But it's sometimes not enough, right? It requires you to be more proactive. And so, what my team, and I have a sort of fantastic small team at the HBAR Foundation, Wes Geisenberger, who is the head of our Sustainable Impact Fund. He leads the fund. And the reason that I came to the foundation, as well as our colleague Hanya Othman, our goal is to work with these policymakers so that they have a good technical base even before the rulemaking happens. So we don't want the the rule to be drafted, comments to be sought, and then have to explain that, someone got something wrong. We want there to be, good understanding of what can be accomplished. And here's why that can matter. It can be very complex, but, if you are in an environmental regulatory agency in the United States or anywhere in the world, and you want to achieve a certain outcome, you often have to understand what technology tools you have at your disposal. And often rules will do something like, or they'll ask for a requirement for best available control technologies. And then they may have some details about what those could look like. And sometimes they'll leave that for the future. We want to be sure that to the extent that there are going to be those kinds of regulatory devices used, before we, so just open it up to the world, we want the regulators to have a sense of what those best available tools might look like. That's been our focus. But you're also going to have to contend with, in fairness, with some governments that have decided that this is not where they want to focus their energy, and that's entirely okay, right?
Yeah.
It's you can't please everyone, but the goal is to make sure that the decisions that are made are well informed.
Absolutely. Well, Jonathan, we appreciate you coming on. Where can people continue to follow yourself and the HBAR Foundation?
So we have an intermittent blog that we put out through the foundation. We may stay tuned, have a more focused site to send your listeners to, but for the time being, our LinkedIn profiles, that'll do it.
Perfect. Well, Jonathan, once again, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me and the HBAR Foundation.